Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sanam Arora. I'm back on another edition of NISAUTalks. Recently, you remember we had brought superstar Akshay Kumar with us on NISAUTalks, and today we are going the other way around, and we've got yet another brilliant and super special guest, someone who's actually a part of the Nisau fraternity. Today we have with us our Honorary Fellow, former Chief Election Commissioner of India, Dr SY Quraishi. Hello sir, welcome to London.
Thank you.
So what brings you here? Well, how comes you're in London?
Well, I love to come to London because it's a beautiful city. Secondly, my daughter lives here.
Right.
Look for any excuse. But this time I'm on way to Stockholm, where I'm on the board of International Institute of Democracy and Electoral Assistance, International IDEA, which is an inter-country organization.
Right.
So we have a board meeting twice a year. I'm going for the board meeting.
Right, so, and then you're going to go back to India, and then you were telling me you're coming back again, so how busy are you right now?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. Ever since my retirement, I think I've been busiest. I've never been so busy during my career as I have been now. I'll be coming again to London on 27th of January. This time for a charity of the work. There is an organization called Sight Savers,
right,
which is the Royal Commonwealth Society for the Blind in India. So it's a global organization, but working in India also for 6 years. I'm its India chairman. And India is one of the 6 countries which have their own independent boards.
Okay, wonderful. All right. And recently, Dr. Quraishi, one of the questions a lot of people have been asking us, and we need some guidance and clearance on, is around, or clarity rather on, is around NRI voting. So that's an issue very close to us, and I know you've been quite closely involved. NRI voting, if I'm not wrong, the demand almost started in London, and someone, Rohit Parak, who was very closely associated with us, was also part of that whole journey. So just, could you give us an overview of what NRI voting is all about, where we are today, and what your views on whether we should have it or not, and the journey, the next steps to come?
You know, the NRI movement itself started in 2003 when we had the first Parvasi Divas in India. And in 2008 or 9, there was a demand that NRI should be allowed to vote. And the then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh said that next year when you come, you'll be allowed to vote. That came to us as quite a surprise, an unpleasant surprise, I would say, because we were not prepared. We did not even understand the dimension of the problem. Because our problem was that if we start enrolling NRI voters, what is their number? Nobody knew. It may be millions. And then registering millions of people is not very easy, particularly in certain countries. Like Saudi Arabia, like Middle Eastern countries, or even the European democratic countries. So we consulted the External Affairs Ministry, and who were equally upset. In fact, they were more worried. I remember calling the then Foreign Secretary Nirumba Rao to Election Commission, discussing with her. She said we won't be able to handle the pressure. We will share the passport and visa code, so that all the passport, visa data, you will have the access and you process it. Then we said, look, if you can't process it, how can we handle it? So you have to certify every passport as a valid passport. So, but all those worries turned out to be the false alarms, because when finally the act was passed that you can vote at the permanent address which is registered in your passport. Right. You have to physically come back to vote. And the response was very, very poor. And I remember Kerala elections were due around that time. In 1 month, about 8,500 voters registered as voters, of which half of them even came to vote. Because from the Gulf to Kerala, probably it is easy. And one even stood as a candidate and lost. So, but then...
That's quite something.
Yeah, quite something.
Yeah.
And beside Kerala, Punjab has given lots of NRIs, only 3 were registered. So we were wondering what is it that when they come for NRI, they demand loudly for voting rights, and when the right is given, they don't register. So obviously one reason given was that the law requires that you go back home.
Which is an obvious barrier, yes. Yes.
Now, in fact, our other worries were that all kinds of malpractices.
Yes.
Now, even 4,500 Keralites who came back to vote, I'm not sure whether they all came at their own expense. For all you know, somebody brought them by giving them free air. And how did they get leave to come home just to come and vote? Because there are lots of malpractices involved, and we see it all the time. So, in any case, what as it transpired that the number of people registering was very, very small. It's just about 14,000-15,000 after 7, 8, 9
all
years.
Over the country,
all over the country,
15,000.
15,000 after 7, 8 years. And so that is a very small number, and when they happen to be in town, when the elections are happening, they go and vote. That's why they were demanding, there was a PIL file from a group in London only, that they should be allowed to vote other ways, particularly proxy voting, which is allowed to the soldiers, and also e-postal ballot, which is a via media between normal postal ballot, because in this case what will happen is the ballot will come to you by email, and then you download it, you print it out, and then print it and send it by post, registered post, and that will save half the time. So Supreme Court suggested that Election Commission set up a committee to examine the issue, which was done by the Election Commission. They looked at all kinds of systems and zeroed in on 4 systems. Physical voting in the polling station was one, postal ballot was another, e-postal ballot was the third, and proxy voting was the fourth. So there are pros and cons of all. Now we cannot have physical voting in an embassy. Now normally a polling station has only 1,000 voters. Imagine, can you have London, India House, London, where 10 lakh voters appear to vote? How will we manage? It's impossible. So finally the government passed an act
very recently.
Very recently, I think on 9th of August of 2018. Lok Sabha passed it, Rajya Sabha passed it earlier, that proxy voting will be allowed as to the soldiers. Now what is proxy voting? That you can authorize anybody to vote on your behalf, which will be permanently on a record, permanently registered that your proxy is so and so, so that he or she can go and vote on your behalf. Questions were raised about this in principle, because whether it is violative of secrecy. Number one, the secret desire to vote for the X, you are sharing with somebody, even if it is your spouse or your parent, you are sharing it with somebody. Secondly, what is the guarantee that he or she is going to vote exactly as you wanted it?
Yes.
He or she may exercise her own judgment. So these are 2 violations of the basic principles of voting. So that's why it is still a question mark. Now, third issue which makes this reform questionable is that although we allow it to the soldiers, and though not many are using it so far, why should the migrant coming abroad be treated from migrants within the country?
Right, so if I am a migrant worker and I've gone from Bihar to Gujarat, I can't use proxy voting.
You can't use that. No, it is discriminatory.
Yes, but if I've gone from Bihar to London, I can.
Yeah, from Bihar to London you can, from Bihar to Delhi and Bombay you cannot. Why? Now, what is the logic for this? Right. Second issue in the entire thing is that operation of the model code of conduct. That you cannot bribe voters, you cannot entertain them even to a cup of tea. There in India, we come across the biryani parties and liquor parties and all kinds of favors and maybe free transport to the polling station. All that is illegal. We check it all the time. We have thousands and thousands of parties to check model code violations. We won't be able to do that in outside India. Now, this also is discriminatory. How can we have double standards? Double standards go against the basic principle of equality in the Constitution. But I think in its enthusiasm, government is going ahead with it. Let us see how it works.
What do we think is driving that enthusiasm?
Well, obviously the enthusiasm is the number one, that when NRIs come to India, they talk of patriotism, but although their critics say that they hardly invest any money in India, they want their rights from India. What is India doing for them? They forget what they are doing for India. So that's a common complaint of Indians living in India. Obviously, the drive for the politicians is the vote. If they feel that they have a captive the vote banks here, and their results will be altered to their advantage. So that must be their enthusiasm.
Yeah, and actually we have very active overseas branches of a number of political parties across the political spectrum, particularly in the UK but also in US, and we've heard stories of how, you know, NRIs in the thousands will call up people and influence them to vote a certain way. So one can only extrapolate that one bit further to say how they'll use proxies. But it's very interesting. You spoke of, you mentioned patriotism and the role, the patriotism that an NRI may or may not have. So whilst one doesn't question that, and I guess this is more general, do you see a difference between patriotism and nationalism as we speak of it today in those terms? I mean, once upon a time they were the same thing.
Yeah, quite right. That distinction is becoming wider, which is sad, because the issue here is the purity of elections. Now, can it be somebody's case that the elections have to be pure within the country and they can be impure outside? Now, you know that we send observers, thousands of observers go to election to see whether the model code is being followed in practice.
Oh, so this is something the election commission does?
Election commission.
So these are volunteers or these are people you employ?
No, they are employed. They are senior officers of the government of India.
Okay,
Joint
as observers.
to see the things are fine. Now, can we be sending observers abroad? Observers will be very happy to come to London and Paris and New York, but can we afford it? Now, imagine an election where following two yardsticks, that double standard, that in India every 1 rupee given in charity outside a temple is held as a violation, but that parties, drink parties and biryani parties which may be happening in London or Paris, they will go undetected because there is no way we are going to check them, there are no observers. So to me, basically this violation of the equality and equal standard is a serious flaw with the system, just because we have vote banks.
So what we're saying is that perhaps all politicians across all party lines are actually equally guilty of doing this, because, you know, no one has actively spoken against NRI voting because of vote bank.
Because,
and Dr. Quraishi, you were mentioning at some point to me that there could be all sorts of angles that people don't speak of or even think of, like the Khalistani angle in particular around NRI voting. Right. So do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, in fact, before that, remind me about this question, but I would like to tell you, the group of youngsters who actually went in PIL in the Supreme Court from London only.
Yes.
Pravasi
Bharat. Naginder is a gentleman. Yes.
Let me appreciate their honesty. When they called me for a lecture, when I spoke to them and I told them about the double standard, they were so honest. They say, frankly, this thought had not crossed their mind, and actually my feeling is they lost their enthusiasm after that for the mission they had started, because they saw the merit of my argument, that here the election will not be as clean as they are in India. So that's very sweet of the young fellows. So they saw the logic, they saw the point and registered it and were honest enough to admit it. As much in
and these are pure gentlemen. I've interacted with them.
Isn't it?
Yes, no, absolutely.
They're lovely boys and girls, who were so honest. And they say, sir, what you're saying makes total sense, and we realize that maybe we made a mistake. Yeah. They went to this extent. Yes. Now, the other issue was now the vote banks. Now, obviously, most of the NRIs are living in pockets. Yeah. There are 4, 5, 7 states which contribute to maximum NRIs. Punjab is one, Uttarakhand is another, Haryana, Gujarat. Yes. So most of the NRIs will be from there. Now imagine if about 20,000 NRIs from a particular constituency of Gujarat or Punjab, so voting on block for something, and which can even change the result, right? You might think whatever. So what? There is a basic question about NRI voting, that you guys are not living there, so you are not contributing. You are not giving any taxes there. Whereas an MLA who will be elected or who MP will be elected will be looking after that area. So what welfare activity will you introduce as an elected person there? So what is your vested interest? Nothing.
Can I play devil's advocate on
please.
that? So at the union, the Students and Alumni Union in the UK, we look after people who are both holders of Indian passports as well as British Indians. Now, those who are holders of Indian passports are generally students or young professionals who are here to gain some work experience for a few years. So we actually think they have a direct stake in India, because ultimately they're going back. It may be after I complete my graduation for 3 years that I go back, or it may be I'm working for a couple of years, learn a bit of money, repay my loan, and then I'll go back. So actually they have some form of a direct stake in India. So, and that brings me on to a separate point I had, which was around diaspora policy making, and what your view on is. Because my view is, you can't have a one-size-fits-all diaspora policy making, because you have these pockets. You have NRIs, you have PIOs. Within NRIs, you have students who will go back. You have those NRIs who are living permanently abroad, and then you have different pockets in different countries with completely different, requirements. So what do you think about policy making?
No, you as very clearly, as you said, the diaspora has two segments. One is the NRIs, non-resident Indians who are Indian passport holders and will go back.
Yeah.
The others are PIOs, people of Indian origin. They have relinquished their nationality. They in any case have no business. If you have relinquished your nationality, you have no business to be.
Or they were born into first, second, third generation.
Yes, first, second, third generation. Oh, fine. If you have some cultural connect, you respect, you love your country of your origin. But what do you do for that country? They politically you have no right, you have no business to have any say there. So that should be a very clear distinction. Now you had asked the question about say Khalistan movement. Now people raise that question. Now suppose there are NRIs in Canada, and there are 4 ministers in Canada cabinet today who have Khalistani loyalty background.
So these are people of Indian origin.
Indian origin.
Who have Khalistani loyalties in the Canadian cabinet.
In the Canadian. Now in any case, PIOs are not allowed to vote, but there are NRIs also. Very large number of NRIs living there who also may be under their influence. Now imagine that kind of politics, if it can be played. They may do their campaign that on block 20-30,000, like let us say Chief Minister of Punjab's constituency, if there are some NRIs abroad, and they make it a point to defeat the candidate in Punjab and bring in somebody who belongs to their thinking and their loyalty, that can disturb India's political climate. So therefore it's a little tricky issue, sensitive issue, and should not be guided by populism. We have to see all the dimensions of it.
And speaking of populism, that brings a whole, what is the Supreme Court, Indian Supreme Court in the recent past has delivered some exceptional judgments, groundbreaking judgments, judgments that go against what is the majoritarian view. And in fact, one of the Supreme Court judges even delivered that as his verdict, that you can't go by a majoritarian view, you've got to do the right thing. So we've had Section 377 go away, we've had the Sabrimala verdict, we've had just these, number of different path-breaking decisions, and the CBI is in the CBI versus CBI thing is going on in the courts right now. What is your view as someone who's been within the system, but also just as an Indian citizen, of where we are going? Are we heading towards a possible Supreme Court versus the populist type of situation? Because that's what it started to feel like that. Or is this just the few months before elections and it'll all go away once elections are done with, because everyone's excited?
Well, actually it is both. populism is dangerous, and populism and majoritarianism somehow go together. And now 51% people voting for something can negate the rights of the 49%, and they can change the law, they can change the constitution.
As we saw in Brexit in this country.
Right. Now they can even change the constitution, which is why in India the Supreme Court has come to the rescue, and they laid down the principle of basic structure of the constitution, that whatever be your majority, a brute majority in parliament, you cannot change the basic structure of the constitution. That is sanctified. That is, yeah. So now that is a very, very good interpretation, and several judgments after that have come after subsequently protecting the basic structure of the constitution. Now that is a principle which goes directly against majoritarianism. So majoritarianism has to be guarded against, and the government themselves should be sensitive to this idea that they should not force their majoritarian thinking over minority. Because they have to. That is where they have to think of national good rather than the party welfare.
When you speak of minorities, who do we define as the minority in India today? Because the majority is saying, "Hum khatre mein hain." The minorities are always in khatra. So who is actually the real minority? And I ask this with a pinch of cynicism, because that's all you're reading in the media today. The media, by the way, which will come on to separately. But who is the minority?
I think you brought it out very beautifully. How can 80%, 90% be minority and under threat?
Yeah.
Then if 90% or 80% can be under threat, who is not under threat? And then very aggressively they push this point. I think that's basically ridiculous. The whole proposition is ridiculous.
And we were sort of touching on the media front. I am quite interested, Dr. Quraishi, in understanding what a lot of people have been asking us this recently, because in today's day and age it is very easy to, on social media, on Twitter, etc., find out what's going on, because somewhere or the other someone is speaking the truth and someone's sharing their views, particularly on Twitter. So you got the social media, which obviously there's a threat of fake news, there is a threat of AI, deep fake videos, etc. But you also got a lot of people pushing the truth out on all ends of the spectrum, completely in a non-political fashion. And on the other hand, you have our mainstream media, which is meant to be the guardian of democracy, right? But you increasingly, and there are a few channels in particular on mainstream media that seem to peddle a very dangerous narrative, which to my mind could lead to unrest in the country. And obviously this has never happened before, or if it's happened, it's not been this obvious, at least to my mind, before. So what can the Election Commission do? Because this is clearly before elections, and it's across the political spectrum. It's not one or the other, it's across the political spectrum. So what can and what can't the Election Commission do? That's a question that a lot of people are asking.
Yeah, that's a very important question. Number one, the Election Commission is totally powerless before and after the elections. We come into play only after the announcement of the poll schedule, when the model code comes into play. When, of course, the Election Commission becomes very, very powerful.
So sorry, just 1 second. So right now we have the state elections in a number of states, 5 states.
Right.
So would you be very powerful then in the state in which the election is going on and not outside of it in the other 28 states?
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
Okay.
Wherever the model code is in operation and where the election is happening. It may be in a state or within a state, in a constituency, in a district. So our power extends to just that place.
Right.
Except, plus, now suppose there is a by-election for one parliament seat in a state. So in that district, in that area, surely there will be a model code violation. But there will be a restriction on the cabinet of that state from passing any judgment or decision to benefit that constituency, because it will benefit them politically.
Okay.
So therefore, to that extent, it extends beyond the constituency to the state. And even at the national level, there may be one election in Madhya Pradesh, one election, but union government, suppose it passes an act that for this district we are going to announce a fabulous scheme. So
that's
therefore,
taken into
to that
account.
extent it extends outside, but for day-to-day operation, what kind of a speech is happening, what the way the election machinery is working, expenditure control, all that is monitored only within the election area.
What about media? Media transcends boundaries. National media is playing everywhere in the country. In regional languages, in Hindi, in English, in all the languages, we're playing everywhere. So, if I have an election today in Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh, for instance, as we have right now, but in all the states, including in Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh, this sort of dangerous narrative is being peddled on mainstream media, on some of the channels. What can the election commission do then? Can it do anything?
Well, during the election period, at least in that area, the election commission can do. It can register cases against even the channel.
Or it can do that?
It can, if they are in violation of any of the laws. But you pointed out a very interesting thing that in this age of technology, in electronic media particularly, it extends beyond the boundary of an election going state. And now, since we have elections in many phases for some different reason, which I will explain to you. Suppose in 5 districts, one phase is in operation, but announcements which will influence the election can be made from the state capital or from even the neighboring state, and the audience is common. So the Madhya Pradesh election, somebody will say that an announcement was made in Jaipur, and Jaipur is not under, or Lucknow is not under election. We can say anything, but the audience is where the election is. So this kind of thing, which is something which political parties are taking advantage of regularly. 1 or 2 parties particularly, they make sure that on the day of the poll in some place in the neighboring constituency, their top leader will be making doing live speeches, which will be live telecast and heard verbatim in the neighboring thing. So law must be followed not only in letter but in spirit also. And we follow a violation of the law in spirit wholesale, but in some cases violation even in letter.
And in terms of how, so in recent times, there's been all the institutional fabric of our country has been spoken of a lot more than it was in the past for various reasons. Supreme Court, CBI, RBI, IAS, IFS, all the fabric, the institutional fabric of our country. Part of which is obviously the Chief Election Commissioner's office and how that functions. So, could you please describe on a summary level how the Chief Election Commissioner is actually how they actually come into being, how they're appointed, etc.
Well, election commissioners are appointed first. Nobody is appointed as CEC directly.
Okay.
They are appointed as election commissioners. And it's a convention that when they become the senior most, that out of the 3, the senior most is appointed as the CEC. There is no law, and I feel that there should be a law, because it should not be left to the discretion of the state, because otherwise what happens is the other 2 commissioners, they feel they are on probation. Is the government happy with me? Are they watching me?
So they are government appointees.
The government appointees. We are appointed by the government of the day. Now, which is the second flaw. Now, obviously, government appoints everybody. They are all government appointments, but they are appointed, most of such postings are done on the recommendation of a collegium, collective decision, so that it is not just unilateral appointment. And
but that collegium is a typical thing, not a legal thing.
Yeah. Typically, the collegium is the Prime Minister, the leader of the opposition, and the Chief Justice. In our case, the way we are following it.
Which is the same as for the CBI, for instance.
For the CBI, for the CVC, Chief Vigilance Commissioner, Chief Information Commissioner, all 3, and National Human Rights Commissioner.
Right.
These 4 are appointed by a collegium. Supreme Court judges are also appointed by the collegium, but in that case, the collegium is all judges only, 5 senior most judges of the Supreme Court. But it's a collective decision, it is not one man's decision. I think basically it's a very good idea. Now, if a leader, when I am appointed, besides the Prime Minister, if leader of opposition also signs my appointment, I feel so much more confident. Then nobody will be able to raise a finger at me. Otherwise, the chances are, oh, he is so-and-so, the appointee, must be soft to them, which is not correct, which is not fair. That kind of pressure on us is not fair. I was appointed by the Congress party, for instance, and although I think I did very well and everybody acknowledged that I was very fair, I even censured the law minister of the land, who had actually issued my appointment letter, because that much of neutrality. But then even an occasional finger pointing used to hurt.
Yes.
And it is possible that maybe I was extra harsh to the Congress
because
in order to prove
yes.
to myself that I am fair. Now that pressure is avoidable. Why? Not only I should be fair, I should appear to be fair. And that appearance can come when leader of opposition is a signatory to the appointment. Then even if I go against the opposition party, they cannot raise a finger because they had signed my appointment letter.
Right.
Right. So these gestures, and let me tell you, all over the country, everywhere the election commission is appointed by a very cumbersome procedure, and electoral college, this collegium is the least. In many cases there is a parliamentary hearing. In some cases that parliamentary hearing is live telecast, the whole nation listens to you, and then you are appointed. Here very quietly, one fine day, the government of the day, the Prime Minister writes to President and the appointment takes place. I have been a beneficiary of that, but have never been happy with that. I would have been happier when if a collegium with a leader of opposition had also signed my appointment letter.
Absolutely. Okay. And I'm going to try something new to wrap this session up, but I'll say a word and you've got to give me a rapid fire response. So this is my version of Karan Johar's rapid fire round. Let's see you do it.
Let's see how it works. I may not be as smart as Karan Johar's interview.
Yes. Let's go for it. So I'll say my word, you give me your first thought back. Okay. EVMs.
Very dependable.
Very dependable, very interesting. Electoral bonds.
The retrograde step, it will take away transparency.
Interesting. Demonetization.
I would rather not comment. Questionable.
Questionable, okay. Implementation of GST.
I'm not very familiar with that. That's not my subject, but I hear problems are continuing.
The recent appointment of the CEC.
2 days ago.
That's right.
Sunil Arora. I think that was natural, normal, good. That since he was the senior most, he had to be appointed, and that is how it should be.
One organization you think is doing exceptional work in any field?
Election Commission of India. I think Supreme Court.
Supreme Court. Brexit.
Somehow I'm very against it. I feel very sad.
Okay, and finally, one comment on National Indian Students and Alumni Union, UK.
Oh, you're doing a wonderful work. That's a very good idea because India's presence in UK is very, very strong, and they have been making a good contribution. And Sanam, I particularly admire your leadership qualities. You set it up almost single-handedly and you are running it so well. I'm personally witness to what you have been doing. Congratulations to you.
That is exceptionally kind. Thank you so much, Dr. Quraishi, for being with us. We're taking Dr. Quraishi tonight actually to the London School of Economics to talk about a lot of the stuff we've discussed, but for students at the LSE and at other universities to actually be able to directly engage with Dr. Quraishi, such a rare breed of fine legends of India, I would say, in a way. So we'll see a lot of you there, but for those of you who don't manage to come tonight, hopefully this video gives you a flavor, and do send in any questions, any requests to us, secretary@nisau.org.uk. Thank you.